Many blessings to everyone. I hope that you guys are doing wonderful. I have to tell you that I started a video and I was about 8 minutes in and I accidentally pressed one of the buttons in my keyboard and it stopped the video. And so either I had to start all over again or probably intense energy from the subject that I was addressing. In any event, here I am again. I hope that you guys are doing really well. And I was inspired to share a little bit about a subject that one of the subscribers commented and asked me if I would address. And I love when you guys ask me to address to share on a particular subject, and this is a subject that I've actually written 2 books about, um, and it's regarding the twin flames. And the question was, what is their purpose, their collective purpose? And I guess the question is being asked, what is their collective purpose in this timeline or at this present moment? And so I like to share a little bit of my insight. Of course, I remind you that there is never an obligation to please accept what resonates, to always leave what doesn't. And my job is not to influence, but to connect, help you connect some dots, especially if something is resonating. Yes. And so, yeah, the twin flames, a very hot, sought out purpose, especially about a decade, which started about a decade ago. Of course, we've had twin flames here for as long as we've existed, but the twin flames became a hot commodity about a decade ago. And one of the reasons why it did is because, unlike what many may think, twin flames are not, their primary purpose is not precisely to be in this amazing relationship, in a partnership relationship. And yes, of course, it is one of the benefits that twin flames can enjoy, which is to have an amazing uh, partnership. But it's not the primary purpose. We have to go back to why the twin flames were created. The critics, which is the creator of all things, um, created a flame, and then from that flame, it had a desire to, just like from the absolute, our purpose here is to refine ourselves back to that place of wholeness, of knowing that we are the flame and that we are part of the universal life force. Um, in the case of the twin flames, the critics had a desire and an intention, which was that out of a flame, it created 2 aspects, and its desire was that eventually, through time and space, that these 2 aspects would unify and become one, have a remembrance, a recognition, and through the energies that created the one, bring them back into unification. But why would the critics desire that? Well, I have no idea. But what I do know is that I definitely had a purpose here in this earth realm, because as a collective, as a humanity, we came here not remembering. And the spiritual journey itself is about remembering and going back to the self realization that we are part of the universal life force. And because of free will and because of that forgetfulness, the critics knew that in order to help us come back to that place of remembrance, that we would need help of the twin flames, and thus became one of the primary tasks of the twin flames to come here and share many lifetimes, by the way, in many different capacities, from being siblings to being parent and child to being friends to being one here in the physical realm, one in the etheric realm, or in another dimension. And through these many different cycles of experiences, learning, growing, teaching each other, reminding each other, and coming together. And it's interesting because I want you to watch something, even with my hands. My hands seem to be separate, or, there's a distance between my hands as I hold them right now. And then as I bring them closer, you could see that there's almost like an invisible magnetism. And as they come closer and closer, there's a what? A mergence, a unification. And this energy that begins to become intense as there's emergence is one of the reasons why the twin flames are here, because in creating and in bringing themselves together, unifying, they create this magnetic force field. And we need it and need that magnetic force field to create that field that will hold and feed the energy of unification, that will bring us all together, that will remind us that we're all part of the universal life force as one, but with many different, a multitude of aspects, and personalities and individualities. So, of course, a lot of those twin flame relationships ultimately became partnership relationships, because where else do we, have the opportunity and are challenged with, heartache, emotional debris, feelings of unworthiness, rejection, abandonment. We could experience that in any kind of relationship, but the intensity is really felt, when it's in a partnership relationship. Never mind that in partnership relationships, there is also something very intimate, that through sacred union, we also have an opportunity to become unified, even if for some it only is physical, on a etheric and spiritual level, soul level, it is so much more. Again, it feeds into that field of becoming one, of becoming unified. And so, yes, that is why many of these twin flame relationships are observed, witnessed, and experienced on a partnership level. My observation, and when I was actually called to be a holder of that field, was when I encountered my own encounter with my twin flame. And trust you me when I tell you that it was one of the most grueling, exhausting, taxing, emotionally exhausting relationships that I've encountered. And one of the reasons why it was so challenging is because many times, especially before the new paradigm, the twin flames were in opposite spectrums in a vibrational state. In other words, most twin flames were a lower aspect, a diamond in the rough, and a higher aspect, which means that they had some conscious awareness, they were already on their spiritual journey, had encountered a lot of spirituality. And this is in truth why there's been a history for there being so much pain, so much agony, so much despair in the twin flame components, because these two different aspects were not meeting at the same level of vibration. And so there was like a pull and a tug, going on, especially prior to the new paradigm, And you can imagine what happens, if you've ever played tug of war, what happens, there's really very little movement because, each person is fighting and struggling to stay in their place, in their state, or their vibration. And so this kind of happens, and the result is that there's very little movement. This one is trying to pull this one up, and this one is trying to stay here, so it pulls this one down, you know? And there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of struggle, and there's a lot of uh, exhaustion of the energy in this struggle, you know? We have to kind of take a step back and remember again that the goal was for unification of these aspects, of these two aspects. And so my observation again has been over the last 20 years that the high aspect takes a lot of that burden, in trying to keep this vibration while almost pulling and carrying the lower aspect. And this lower aspect, in many ways, resisting. Ooh, painful, right? Anyway, I wrote 2 books that were both, in many ways, geared to address a twin flame relationship. The first one was Female Divine, Hurt No More. And I want you to hear that word, hurt no more. Because the feminine aspect of the flame, whether you are a female gender or male, we have both aspects. I kind of think you guys know that already, right? Most of you. As the feminine aspect carries a lot of that burden because the feminine aspect holds compassion, holds the womb, holds nurturing and nourishing. It's just a very vulnerable field. And the masculine side is scared and usually hides and is resistant because it's afraid or injured, punctured. And so the first book was Female Divine, Hurt No More. And in this book, I invite the feminine aspect to recognize that the time for sacrifice, for, holding all of that burden, especially through partnership relationships, came to a close after the new paradigm came into existence. But because we've played as a feminine aspect that role so many times over so many lifetimes, even now in this new paradigm, we don't know how to stop being from that place of the womb, of being the sacrifice, of the sacrificial, aspect. And so it's a really hardcore book. It has a lot of work where we could identify if we've been participating in these kind of relationships. And it has a lot of homework to help us to heal from the past wounds, from all of those relationships, especially a painful, toxic, twin flame relationship. So that we can be ready for the next level. And I'll get back to that in a moment. And then the second book that I wrote was Male Divine, Hide No More. And that book was inspired by, obviously, by the name, by the title, which is that as a wounded warrior, many of the masculine aspects feel that they need to take this very resistant, very non-emotional role. And there's an amazing power, empowerment, and vulnerability in being able to express our emotions and to really embrace our feminine side. So again, this is not about gender. This is about recognizing that in truth, that flame that became two is composed of both feminine and masculine energy. It has both. And so in truth, the union and unification is not only to hold the field of unification, but to bring the two aspects of the masculine and feminine back into its wholeness. And yes, it's played out in relationships. And yes, it's played out many times in the genders. And that's how it plays out. But we need to be able to take it above, the relationship, and above the fact that we're female and masculine, and or female and male, and be able to take it to a place where we remember that the goal is to bring it back to oneness, to wholeness, and to unification. Anyway, those books were written right at the cusp of 2010, and again, it is my understanding, based on the insight that I receive, that 2010 represented the closure of that field of twin flames. In other words, it was coming to an apex, and any twin flame holders that were successful in making it through the new paradigm together and vibrating at a fairly balanced frequency of complementing each other, then God bless, they made it through, and now they would be able to usher the field in the new paradigm and become what is known as the second wave of twin flames, complementary energies. If they did not succeed in going through the threshold prior to the new paradigm, then they remain twin flames, but the field of twin flames, I don't know how to say this because I want to say it correctly. It's not that it's not important, but it's no longer being held in that place of the struggle of the lower aspect and the higher aspect. There was a time and place for that prior to the new paradigm, but in entering the new paradigm, we have new energies, we have a whole new force field, and moving closer and closer to the realization and the knowingness, the recognition that we are truly all one, and becoming, in many beautiful ways, a collective. And so there is no longer a field being held for the opposition of twin flames being in different vibrations. If they did not make it through the threshold prior to 2010, or at the closure of 2010, then there is no longer a need to continue to suffer or to have that struggle. And in truth, in the new paradigm, the second wave, which is the twos, is now being at the forefront, being held by complementary energies. And so in a roundabout way, the twin flame field has been replaced by complementary energies in the new paradigm. I want to make it clear again, it doesn't mean that the twin flames do not hold a sacred space. First of all, they hold a sacred space in all the amazing work that they collectively contributed prior to the new paradigm, and they will always be part of the one aspect of the one flame, and so they're honored for that. However, going into the new paradigm, they're not at the frontier, unless, of course, they made it through the threshold and now they're vibrating on a very complementary energy level together. Now they're moving mountains together. And they really are moving mountains together because they're twin flames and they're vibrating, on the same energy frequency or close to it. But if they're wow, did you see that? My computer just completely went haywire. I apologize for that. That usually happens actually in my office all the time. Lights go on and off, electricity, devices, all on their own. Oh,
Many blessings.
and here we go again.
I hope that everyone is doing really well. It's always a joy to connect with you. And
I am 20 minutes into this video, and so I apologize for that. I have absolutely no idea. I am not touching anything. But as I started to say, usually when we enter into these very high vibrational channelings, sharings, and topics, I'm sure this happens to many, but the devices, the electricity, the electronics go completely haywire. And it's just a beautiful validation that there's an immense energy field being shared and held right now. So I apologize for that again. Anyway, so if twin flames are currently in the new paradigm and they are vibrating in the same frequency, then they clearly are moving mountains because they're twin flames and they're holding the same frequency. So the acceleration of what they're doing together, contributing together, is amazing. However, if they're not, then there's no longer that strong field that was supporting twin flames in spite of their polarities, because been there, done that, and again, what's in play right now is complementary energies. And so, to kind of bring it full circle, yes, there are amazing, beautiful twin flames, of course, in this timeline. Hopefully, they are together, complementing each other and vibrating together and doing amazing work. If you happen to be in a twin flame relationship that you feel that you've recognized and you are still suffering, being rejected, and just experiencing a lot of emotional pain, this is not any longer necessary. You should not feel obligated to be in a relationship because you feel that you need to. That pain was very prevalent prior to the threshold, prior to 2010, and it was real, and I can tell you it was because I experienced it. But I can also tell you that it's no longer necessary, that it had a time and a purpose, and it was a beautiful purpose to bring that unification and the work that needed to be invested to do that, and that so many twin flames attempted to do, is sacred and will be forevermore recognized. But we do no longer need to suffer. This new paradigm is about wonderful joy and harmony and just fulfillment and acceleration and growth and expansion, and love, light, and so we need to look at what the new paradigm is inviting us to experience and be authentic and honest with ourselves, and ask ourselves if the relationships that we may be harnessing or attempting to harness are offering us the promise of those fulfillments or keeping us back. We may have, I think that the individual who asked about the twin flames, I think may have mentioned something about dreams or visions. It is very possible, of course, even now in the new paradigm, that we may have dreams or have energetic or etheric connection with our twin flame. We always connected to them. If your twin flame happens to be in another dimension, then absolutely we can receive support. We do receive support, especially if we're open, receptive to recognizing the connection, the gift of guidance, of love, of support is so very acknowledged and could very well be recognized. If your twin flame is in physical form and you're not together, it's of course that connection is eternal, so you may still experience dreams, and there's always there's no matter what happens, whether we wind up together or not, there's always that pull. And so I hear it all the time where twin flames, not only dream, but they feel the presence, they feel when they're not well, they just feel them. They feel their energy, they feel their emotions. And we just need to be discerning with that and know that we're connected. And yet not let that connection confuse us or pull us into engaging or attempting to engage in a relationship unless it's harmonious. And I know that's not great to hear, but again, there is no longer an obligation to suffer because you have found and identified your twin flame. Oof, that was a lot, yes? Well, I hope that I've kind of shared, some insight that has been helpful. I don't usually promote my books. That's not my style, but of course for this topic, if you're interested in learning more, I would invite you to explore those books. Again, they're Male Divine Hide No More or Female Divine Hurt No More. You can find them on Amazon under my name, Blanca Bayer. They're incredible channeled books, very timely to the twin flame and sacred relationships. Yes? I'd love to hear comments. I remind you again that my job is to just trigger, of course, if it resonates on this subject. But I love to hear your thoughts, your comments, and this may be a topic that we may revisit based on any comments or questions that you may share, and I love to see them. And I hope it's been helpful, yes? Remember, no suffering, complementary acceleration. That's where we move to, and that's where we should move to going forward. I hope that this has been helpful. And as always, I leave you with my love, with my light, and with my peace. I hope that you have an amazing day. I love you.